It's been 2 days since Paul Shears and Bill Chapin tumbled into the icy rapids of Buttermilk Creek. A psychic has located Chapin's sport coat, but there's still no sign of the missing men.
The searchers were becoming frustrated due to the fact that we hadn't made the recovery yet, and that resources were becoming a problem, equipment, and the weather temperatures were very difficult to work in.
Hope begins to fade, and the mood at the scene changes.
We're starting to lose a little bit of hope at this point. We're not slowing down our efforts at all, but in our minds, the chances of finding a survivor at this point were pretty slim.
The searchers hold a vigil for their fallen colleague.
We stood at the bridge, had a little prayer.
Took up a bottle of peppermint schnapps, which was Bill's favorite drink.
They pour the schnapps into the churning waters and throw a wreath over the bridge.
It was a Saturday. We were, it was late afternoon. We were in the process of just starting a gathering for one of our employees who was retiring. He was a fellow firefighter at Ithaca Fire Department, worked for us part-time. It was probably late afternoon, 4 to 5 o'clock, and we were all just heading down to the place for happy hour. Bill at the time was socially coming to the event with us. He wasn't working on duty that evening, so he was dressed in dress shirt, sport coat, tie, dress shoes, and was on his way out to the event. At about the same time, then we got activated for 2 people potentially down in the gorge at Buttermilk. And Bill at the time was very comfortable with the Buttermilk. He worked at Ithaca Safety. He also worked part-time at New York State Park Police, so he was very familiar with all the gorges, all the trails.
The call came in as 2 individuals being stuck on the ice at Buttermilk Creek above the park, and the only problem is the park is really 2 sections, one section off from King Road and one section off Route 13.
It was right after shift change, if I remember correctly, that the call came in, and we responded along with Bangs. We responded to the lower entrance to Buttermilk and met the park police officer there that filled us in on what had happened.
They responded to 2 people stuck in the gorge and with a report of one fallen in. And Bill approached from the top, and he was carrying a fold-up stretcher at the time. And there's this one incidental area where there's a pool, and then the in the gorge trail curves around it, but it's insidious because very early on in the year it forms tremendous, icicles that eventually meet the trail, and then they spread out. They might be a foot in diameter, and so you almost have to crawl in a little tunnel behind them.
I talked with Bill. He responded with a Bangs rig, and they were on the upside. They were on the King Road side, and I gave him an order to come down from the top, and we would find these people, and we would come up from the bottom, and we took the lower trail. The lower trail, and lots of places, the ice was probably a foot thick, and the creek was just roaring.
Our crew got about halfway down the gorge, and it was too icy to keep going down the steps. Concrete, wooden steps, then covered with ice, and so our crew decided to go back up. Bill also was going to go back up until they could find a more comfortable route to get down, and then he changed his mind and said, well, I'm going to take a little bit further down this trail. He had a portable stretcher with him that he was kind of using as a cane, walked down a little bit further, hit a patch of ice, and went down.
So as we were going up, the calls on the radio came in that Bill had slipped and had gone in the water. And from that point, things became pretty chaotic.
So the only thing we had was some ropes. We were hoping that we could do something, but before we finished attaching ourselves, Bill came by, and there's nothing we could do.
You don't believe it when you first hear it. Like, he said he went to rescue somebody and he fell in. I said, well, they find him yet? They said, no, not yet. They're still looking. So I came down and joined in the search and stuff too. And it went through the night, and then I ended up going back to work the next day and coming down during the day and continued with everybody else.
We're all in shock. We're all hurting. But the biggest thing that they wanted to go back up that night, and even though technically I wasn't in charge because I was on sick leave, I said, no one is going back into the gorge tonight. We're not losing another person.
When they called the search off at night because of darkness and everything, it was all scheduled to start at daybreak the next morning, so we all met up there, and it was 4 days of hell, going looking for one of your best friends.
The water was just unbelievably raging. And although you wanted to hold out hope that Bill was someplace holding on to something, in your mind you knew that it would have been a miracle.
We knew the outcome after the second day or whatever, and then we had the memorial service on top of the bridge. Father DeSocio came over, had a whole group of all the rescuers, and we brought a reef and threw it over the gorge, and it was helpful to that extent. And then after that, search resumed again, and it just went on and on.
Where we found him, you can't see it from the trail goes up, and and it might be 20-25 feet above in a very narrow section. I knew how to get there, and we got to this one pool. It was no more than 5 feet across, and they handed me down a very long pike pole, and I started to probe, and I had pulled out some branches in that, but I hooked something, and I knew exactly what I had hooked, and we found Bill.
It was tough. I was on one of the ones to do the recovery, and I was honored to be able to carry him out and be with him as through the process as much as I could. It was very touching, and I'd never been in that position before to do that. Dealing with a lot of those issues before is one thing, but doing it for a friend is another. So.
Prior to that, in attempts to find Bill, somebody contacted a psychic, Phil Jordan, and he had a vision that Bill would be found under some flowers. And we didn't. It was still cold. It was March. We didn't think there'd be any flowers out then and stuff. And I went up there prior to them recovering him, and he was in. There was a pool of water, and the reef was floating there, and that's right where Bill was.
If anybody of all the two crews that were up there, Chapin would have been the one to risk his life to save somebody else's life. That's just the way Bill Chapin was, and it's unfortunate, but he was a great guy. You'll never find another guy like him. When he died, his mold was broken and never be replaced.
Well, he was, he was a type of guy that just got involved in everything. He did the law enforcement side, he did the firefighting side, he was an emergency dispatcher, and then he got involved with us on the medical side, and started out first as an emergency medical technician, and then took the upper level training courses and got certified up to the advanced EMT level. So he was always looking to advance himself no matter what area of profession he was in. He wanted to be the best person that he could be and helping the community out however he could do that.
He was truly interested in law enforcement, and there was no doubt in my mind that that's the direction that he was going to pursue, and he was good at what he did. He really was. It would be interesting to see where his career would have taken him today if he'd lived.
He loved what he did. That was where he belonged.
He was on 24 hours a day. If he wasn't working at Ithaca College, he was on call for Bang's ambulance, whether he was scheduled to work or not. He lived right there. And if he went anywhere, he would usually take an ambulance with him in case they needed him. That's how dedicated he was. He didn't do much on his own.
I mean, even though he wasn't specifically on duty at the time for any of us, for police, fire, EMS, dispatcher, he was always thinking about all those lines of emergency services and always so dedicated to it.
When I understand Bill was off duty at time, and he heard the call and he still went to go help somebody out.
I don't know what the circumstances were. I think they were at a motor vehicle accident where there was this unruly drunk student who needed to go to the hospital but didn't want to, and you could tell a lot from looking and watching Bill, especially his face. And after having a decent discussion with the gentleman, from what I understand, and I can just imagine it, he gets this look on him, and any time you saw that, something was going to happen. And he basically picked up the guy with the bear hug and carried him to the ambulance. And that was the end of it.
He really was fairly soft-spoken. He wasn't a boisterous type, at least not from my way of thinking. I'm much more than he was. But he was very soft-spoken. I never heard him say an unkind word about anybody.
And we used to get together during working hours. A couple funny stories are, he would always come down and he knew where I was working, and he would somehow get into my car and turn all the lights and sirens on and stuff. And our cars were set up so it wouldn't do anything until you turn the key on. So you go and turn the key on, everything's going and you don't know what to turn off first. But I got even with him because he was working. I went up and he left his car unlocked. And his was wired so all the power was on all the time. So I turned everything on, and the last thing I did was the siren. As soon as I turned the siren on, he comes running out the door. So what I did is I locked his door and shut it. And he started chasing me, and then he turned around and runs back to the car. And then he turned around and he didn't know which way to go. And finally he just went to his car and shut everything off. But he would do things like that.
He had a problem with a wisdom tooth. He had an impacted wisdom tooth. And Bill was not the type, he was always the type of person that he would take care of dealing with things, his own personal things, on his own. He didn't need help. So he had scheduled an appointment with a local dentist to have it extracted, and drove himself up. And they ended up putting him under with some anesthesia and extracting the tooth, and then they wouldn't let him leave the office. And they told him that he couldn't drive. So we sent a couple guys up from Central and picked him up and brought him back down and took him upstairs in the bunk room and put him to bed. And he laid there for about 24 hours. And when he finally was able to get up and come down, his face had completely swollen up. And so he thus got the nickname Pie Face.
We were at a monthly meeting of the Southern Tier Law Enforcement Memorial Association, and one of the members brought William Chapin's name to the table, saying that this had happened in line of duty death in 1986 and never been recognized for. So we started the process of an investigation into it to see how it happened, what departments he was part of, and we found he was part of both the Finger Lakes region, New York State Parks Police and Ithaca College Campus Police. So we contacted both departments and started the process.
Well, I met Bill once before I transferred up here into the Finger Lakes area, and I rode around with him. But the way I got involved with the committee was through Dale Johnson, contacted me in Ithaca Police Department. And since he was a seasonal or part-time park police officer with us, we got behind the effort to get him on the memorial wall. And we're working hard with everybody else to do that, to get him on there.
Our mission is to remember fallen officers, those that have passed in the line of duty each year, so they're not forgotten.
Dale said something the other day at our staff meeting when he was addressing our members about Bill, and he said, you know, who's going to remember? And it was just really impactful. We have plaques out on the wall. All of us, I think, have gone through our own personal experiences, some close to home, maybe not, some maybe not so much. What you do, you guys bringing this forward, when I think back to more than a year ago, just knocking on the door saying we'd like to nominate Bill Chapin and we'd like to tell you the story and how can we partner together, it's incredible. So yeah, on behalf of the college, and the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Management, I don't think I could thank you guys enough for bringing this to fruition.
William gave his life trying to rescue some people at the park. That's not what the normal person would do. And as a law enforcement officer, for him to lose his life attempting to do his job, it's a saddened time. It's probably even more saddened when a lot of recognition is not given to the individual who deserves it.
It's important for everybody to know what these officers did, that they put their lives ahead of the public to try to save them. Eventually it did wind up costing them their lives, but it's important for our brother and sister officers who come later on after us to know what these officers did, and it's important for the public to know what these officers sacrificed and what their families sacrificed.
It was a long time ago, but every March when I think about it, it was yesterday.
Got the news on Friday morning, but a tear I couldn't find. You showed me how I'm supposed to live, and now you showed me how to die. I was lost till Sunday morning. I woke up to face my fear. While writing you this goodbye song, I found a tear. I'm gonna miss that smile. I'm gonna miss you, my friend. Even though it hurts the way it ended up, I'd do it all again. So play it sweet in heaven, 'cause that's right where you wanna be. I'm not crying 'cause I feel so sorry for you, crying for me.